We're going to go ahead and get started. I know that we still have quite a few people who need to log in. We'll record this as well as and make it available for everybody. First, I want to thank everyone for taking some time out to be part of what is a very unusual day on the Hill for us. Since we last met and all got together at the DC Lodge and had our briefing for last year, how the world has changed. And it had such promise at that time. We had really come up with a really good strategy on how we were going to move some of our legislative initiatives. And for the first time, we were on track to maybe getting a hearing on Social Security windfall elimination, having regular meetings, and all of this was coming together and doing quite well. And then COVID hit and changed the way we do business, and also changed our I guess our priorities as well, as we had to focus and deal and navigate through our changing climate. Add to that all of the unrest that we had and the defunding movement, and then add to that a new Congress and a new administration, and we've certainly had our challenges when it comes on our legislative front, but we've stayed ahead of it. Your legislative staff has done an amazing job, even when the government was our country was pretty much shut down. Still kept our issues front and center, and the members of Congress, and trying to navigate through these very, very difficult times. So as everything, here we are 9, 10 months later, 11 months later since COVID changed our world, and we all learned this new technology, this new way of meeting across the country through Zoom meetings, and so it's nothing new for all of us. We probably have done our share of them just this week alone. So with that, we are going to have our briefing virtual because the ability to get inside of the Congress is just very difficult right now to make those contacts. So it's going to be different, but at the same time, we certainly did not want to take a chance of not. We recognize the importance of that contact and how it is such a vital part to our legislative efforts. So we wanted to still have this presence. So they got together with the committee and our staff and came up with a strategy that we think will help us move us forward and continue us moving, even though we're not able to meet in person. So again, thank all of you for your participation. We have a lot of information to cover here today, and then I'll come back at the end and we'll answer any questions and kind of dig a little deeper into that. But right now, what I'd like to do is introduce Bob Cherry. Bob Cherry is out of Baltimore, and Bob is the chairman of the Legislative Committee, and he'll give you a little bit of background of how we're going to do this, and he'll introduce our speakers as we move on. Thank you.
Hey, Mark McDonald, can you hear me? Am I good?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. First of all, just want to thank President Yost and Vice President Grimaldi for giving me this opportunity to serve on the national board. With me is Detective Eric Perez. Eric works with me in the Baltimore Police Department, the homicide unit, but it's also on our local and our state legislative committee. Eric and I have been working with our state FOP and our local FOP on a host of legislative issues. And I asked him to join us here today because one of the things that Tim and Jim Pasco want me to talk about is the Grassroots Action Network. And before I go into that, though, I just want to thank my committee, the people who serve with me, my co-chair, Randy Hagler from North Carolina, Pat Chelmo from Minnesota, Frederick Frazier from Texas, and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, I still have down Mark Nelson from Oklahoma. Is Mark still going to be with us on the legislative committee?
Yes, sir, he is.
Okay, great. So just for those members who are on Zoom right now, and for those that will be viewing this later, that's your legislative team. How Randy had done in the past, and I continue doing that, is we broke the nation down into like different regions. So on that next slide that Mark's showing you right now, these are the states and who in the legislative committee is assigned to which state. And what we're asking everyone to do with the Grassroots Action Network is, for those of you who are involved in your legislative issues at the state level or at the local level, we ask that, again, every state have at least one representative, so that when Tim Richardson or Jim Pasco need to get anything out that's important, they can just reach out directly to that state's representative. Here in Maryland, our representative is Mike Shire from Anne Arundel County, FOP Lodge 70. So not only are you, we're asking you to be the person that sets up the meetings over the next 2 weeks with Day in the Hill, but we're asking you to stay involved with our committee, with President Yost, with Tim Richardson and Jim Pasco throughout the year for anything that we may need, whether it be to show up at the White House for a uniform with the president, type of hearing, anything that's going on in Capitol Hill where Tim and Jim may need our assistance. In conclusion, before I turn this over to the executive director, I just want to again stress the importance of local and state politics. Again, like I asked Eric to join me, and I know there's a number of you from Maryland here. We're already ourselves in a big fight, as almost every state in the nation is. Illinois, New York, New Jersey, even the big labor states have now find ourselves in a situation, like President Yost said, where our critics and our enemies are using everything to their advantage to take away our collective bargaining rights, to take away our ability to speak openly and honestly about what's really happening in law enforcement. So the work that really needs to get done isn't necessarily at the federal level, but it's at the local level. It's in those counties and cities across the country, and it's in every state that each one of you represent. So on behalf of the Legislative Committee, on behalf of President Yost and Vice President Gamal, I just encourage all of you to get involved locally and in your states and keep the pressure on those who want to take away, not just, again, like I said, our collective bargaining, our Bill of Rights, but more important, our ability to speak and speak honestly and truthfully to the public, especially at this crucial time, as we see a rise in violent crime across most cities across the country, and at a time when we're losing a lot of good police officers who are moving on to other careers. So with that, again, just, please look at which state you're from and who on the Legislative Committee is your rep, and make sure that the GAN is updated so we can give that to the legislative staff in DC. And with that, President Yost, if there's anything else you don't want me, you want me to say, I will. Otherwise, I'll turn over now to the Executive Director, Jim Pasco.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. And welcome to all of you who are on board listening now, and to those who will be listening live on tape later on. My role today, as it has become over the last several days on the Hill, is to discuss our relationships within the executive branch. As most of you know, over the last 15 to 20 years, the congressional gridlock has reached a point where not much legislation is getting passed, and there's a lot more activity on a day-to-day basis within the executive branch as they tweak current legislation, either by changing the regulations or by executive order, to the extent that they can do that by executive order, to affect the way in which our entire government does business. But for us, the three most important federal agencies on a day-to-day basis, federal departments, are the Department of Justice, the DHS, Homeland Security, and the Department of Labor. So an update on our relationship with the administration won't take as long as usual, because I've only got about a month and a half to talk about. But I am happy to report that up to this point, we're making very good progress in terms of establishing and reestablishing relationships, because a lot of the people, this is usually the case in Washington when a new administration comes in, a lot of the people have been around for a long time, and for good or for ill, so have I. So I know a lot of these people and have dealt with them in other places and other times. And that goes back to the transition. When I met with the transition folks for the first time, if I remember correctly, there were about 20 people, but there was only one that I wasn't sure I had ever met before. The other 19 or so on that group were people that I had dealt with before. And that brings a comfort level, because they know what to expect from you, and you know as best you can what to expect from them. Within as we move forward, a lot of these people found jobs particularly in Homeland and DOJ. Labor is kind of unsettled up to this point, as well as in the White House. In fact, two of the people that were part of my liaison operation with both the Trump and the Biden campaigns during the campaign have ended up one on domestic policy and one in the Office of Counsel at the White House. So these are people that I dealt with on a day-to-day basis. Steph Feldman, who was a labor liaison, is now working on labor and enforcement issues in the Domestic Policy Council. So that's a big plus to her. She's very easy to deal with and a pleasure. And a fellow named Chirag Baines, who was in the Obama Justice Department, ultimately as a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office, is back also in the Domestic Policy Council, and he's going to be handling a lot of the police issues in terms of addressing reform, the so-called policing commission, which may or may not come up, and there's some question as to how it'll be configured when it does. So these are people that we're going to be dealing with, and Patrick and I had an extremely positive call with Cedric Richmond, who's heading up what's essentially the External Affairs Office for the president, and will have an awful lot of involvement in pretty much all issues. He'll be like a minister with a portfolio there. And it was a good call. And, he and Pat know the secret handshake. They're both from that New Orleans area. And so it went off as smoothly as it possibly could, I'd have to say. At DOJ, our more senior members from DC Lodge 1 have had personal experience with Merrick Garland, the nominee for DOJ, who served for years as a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in DC, and then obviously as a federal judge there. And he has a tremendous reputation as someone who really respects the law and really respects law enforcement officers, and his decisions over a lengthy period of time on the bench would reflect that. Lisa Monaco, who's been nominated to be his deputy, has served is probably as experienced a nominee for Deputy Attorney General as you'll ever see. She's been the Homeland Security Advisor to the President. She's been Chief of Staff at the FBI. She's been the Assistant Attorney General for National Security. And, the great thing about Lisa Monaco, and I've known her for about 30 years, the great thing about Lisa Monaco, she's had a tremendous career. She's had a lot of great jobs, and she's gotten an awful lot of attention and respect in DC. But what's great is it's never really affected her from an ego standpoint. She's the same person that I met when she was literally a kid. I guess I was middle-aged and she was a kid when I met her. But in any event, she's a real breath of fresh air and a solid manager, which the number 2 at DOJ has to be, especially given the fact that the number 1 is always a lawyer. So they're not noted for their managerial skills. Alejandro Mayorkas, the newly confirmed Secretary of Homeland Security, also a former U.S. attorney and a very, very strong prosecutor, very much no-nonsense law and order guy. Cuban refugee, came over with his family when he was a very young, small child, came up the hard way, and is very accomplished attorney. As I say, he was a U.S. attorney in LA, and later in his career was ultimately the Deputy Attorney General Deputy Secretary of Homeland under Obama, which is where we first met him. And he's always had a great affinity for the FOP. He's been a strong supporter of ours, and I believe our door will always be open there. And we've got a lot of issues over at Homeland, with the immigration issue, with the unsettled nature of the Homeland jurisdiction, and they turn up in the strangest places doing the strangest things sometimes. And our members aren't, and police officers generally aren't always aware they're coming. but he has pledged to make the relationships with state and local more seamless and more cooperative. And I have every confidence that he'll make some headway in that department. At Labor, as I say, it's somewhat unsettled. They've nominated Marty Walsh. President Biden has nominated Marty Walsh for the position, who's better known up to this point as the former mayor of Boston. So Bob Cherry probably knows a lot more about him than I do. But he, Boston is a very strong labor city and a very strong labor state. That said, I understand, and this is all tentative, and the proof is going to be in the pudding. I'm told that he'll be great for us, that we're going to enjoy working with him and so forth and so on. I'm told by officers and members from Massachusetts that it's been a kind of a bumpy road for police labor up there lately, and that many of the problems have been in Boston. So we'll see. We'll take a wait and see attitude. Everybody starts with a blank slate, but their reputations precede them and kind of inform our thinking as we deal with them. And we'll be cautious and see how it plays out. In any event, I'm cautiously optimistic that things are going to continue to go well. President Yost is spending an awful lot of time in town. My natural instinct is to want my boss to stay in the warmer climes like Louisiana, or even Nashville is warmer in here a lot of the time. So, but he's been such a great ally and such a great support, such a quick study, that it's been a real pleasure to work with him here, and I look forward to productive first session of Congress and moving some legislation that we can take pride in, and hopefully stopping legislation that we're concerned by, or at a minimum improving it so that it's something that we can live with. It's very much an unsettled environment in every sense of the word on the Capitol Hill, and I've always said that when things are pretty chaotic, it's sometimes when you can make your best move. So we're counting on you all to get these people as well informed as we can get them from an FOP perspective, and help us lay the foundation for a productive first session of Congress and a 4-year administration. With that, before I turn it over to Tim Richardson, our senior legislative liaison and longest serving employee in the Washington, D.C. office, I want to introduce the entire staff. First of all, obviously, Tim, and then Mark McDonald, who's been with us for several years now and is a very important part of our staff. Rebecca Tyus, who sits right next to Mark, and they're like Penn and Teller. You can't hear around Mark, and you can't hear anything that Rebecca says. But they're a great team. They both are very productive and very important and valuable members of the Washington staff. Jessica Cahill is probably the newbie at this point, the rookie, but she's fit right in. You'd think she's been here all her life, and she works on the communications end of it principally. But we don't have enough of a staff for anybody to be a specialist, a total specialist. Everybody's got to be a little bit of a generalist, and Jessica's been weighing in wherever she needs to or wherever it's important. So we appreciate the entire group, and Michelle Brosnan Mason. I'm not sure if she's on the premises or not. She's been helping with the move all week, and she's been running around like a chicken with her head cut off. But she's the glue that holds the office together. So it's a good team, and we're very proud to have them. And I hope you'll listen attentively to them because they all have good information for you. With that, I turn it over to Tim Richardson. Thank you.
That he likes that.
There we go. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to National President Yost, to Bob, and of course to Jim for their presentations to date. I'm going to take on the usual role I play at this event, which is to kind of walk everyone through the national legislative briefing book, the materials that we prepared for you so that when you are engaging with your members of Congress, with staff, that you have the information you need to make the best case for the bills that we support and make the best case against those bills that we do not want to see advance. Of course, at this point too, I always want to remind everyone that when you are having those meetings, when you're having those conversations, the Zoom calls, any interactions, you want to keep uppermost in your mind that for the most part, you are the subject matter expert. When Congress and committees are looking to learn about an issue, when they're trying to advance legislation that helps move the ball forward, that's who they call on. They call on subject matter experts, practitioners, the men and women who do the job or are working to solve those issues that they intend to legislate about. So when you have those interactions, make sure you keep that in mind. Sometimes you may have to remind them, especially if they're elected officials who may have made up minds. You are the men and women who are out there that are affecting the traffic stops, that are doing the investigations, that have to chase down the suspect and have to rely on qualified immunity. Take your seat at the bargaining table and negotiate for your wages, hours, and working conditions. All of that is you. And it's important that these relationships have that as their primary understanding. You are there to help them, to help you. And obviously, a working relationship is something that has to be valued between you as a member, your local lodge, and your state lodge. We do have friends up here on Capitol Hill. We may not agree with them all the time, but we have a relationship, so dialogue is possible. And that is the most valuable coin for the legislative advocate, both for the staff here in the Washington, D.C. office, but especially for our members in the states and the districts who send these elected officials to the Hill. That being said, let me walk you quickly through the National Briefing Book. We have divvied it up, of course, to begin with our national legislative priorities in this Congress. First to be introduced this year is H.R. 82, the Social Security Fairness Act, which would repeal both the WEP, windfall elimination provision, and the GPO, the government pension offset. This is identical legislation to, I guess, the past many Congresses now. We came very, very close. We made a tremendous amount of progress on advancing this bill to get to a potential vote in the last year. We had a driven, they called it the kitchen cabinet, with one of the sponsors, Ron Davis, Republican from Illinois, and Garrett Graves from Louisiana, who kind of gathered the public safety organizations, put them together in a serious drive to get to 290 co-sponsors, which would have triggered an automatic consideration of the bill on the House floor. That same rule remains, so that continues to be our goal. We got, I think we were 30 some shy, maybe a little less than 30 some shy last Congress. So we already have, I think, not quite 200 remaining co-sponsors of this legislation from the previous Congress. Those are the ones we're going to focus on. You'll see the last few pages of this briefing report has a list of those members of Congress. These are members who had already put their names on this bill and in support of the legislation just a year ago. So those are the ones that we would ask our grassroots members to make sure that they discuss this. Remind them they previously co-sponsored this legislation, and we look forward to having their support again in this Congress. Now, the Senate companion bill we expect to be introduced sometime in the next 2 weeks. With the other activities in the Senate, the delay in organizing that body, the Senate's a couple of weeks behind from where it would normally be at this stage in the first session. So we'll go to the second top priority that's already been introduced, which is HR 962, the Law Enforcement Officers Equity Act. This legislation expands the definition of law enforcement officer to all federal law enforcement officers with respect to how they are treated in retirement. This is called, under the code, 6C retirement. Most federal law enforcement officers receive this benefit, but not all. We have a number of different agencies, who have the same law enforcement responsibilities, just a different badge and maybe a different colored uniform, who are not treated as law enforcement officers for the purposes of retirement. This legislation would correct that oversight. Now, it has been introduced in the past by Representative Peter King. With his retirement in this Congress, it is Representative Pascrell and Mr. Brian Fitzpatrick out of Pennsylvania that have supported, that have introduced it. The key here for us has always been getting enough co-sponsors. We need to do that. We need to drive that number up. You see that it's 3 right now. We were in the 30s, which was a high watermark in the previous Congress. We've got to get more support on those. It's important, even if you are not a federal law enforcement officer, to talk to your members in support of this legislation, because the same rights and benefits that they are seeking as a law enforcement officer, to be treated as and recognized as a law enforcement officer, could mirror events in your own state as things in the state and localities change, as the attitudes toward police labor have changed in the last year or so. So it may not affect you if you're a state or local law enforcement officer, but it is important to you. It's been designated a top priority of our organization, and we definitely want to make sure you communicate our support, our support of this bill, and the fact that it is a top priority. Again, the Senate companion legislation is slated to be introduced by Senator Booker sometime in the next week or so. Moving on to the Public Safety Employer-Employee Cooperation Act. This is our collective bargaining bill, sets a floor for what states need to do as a minimum for recognizing the right of public safety officers to cooperate. We're talking with Representative Peter Stauber, a sophomore legislator in the House, who is an FOP member and a former law enforcement officer out of Duluth. He's working on the legislation along with, again, Mr. Fitzpatrick, Ms. Spanbarger, who's a former postal inspector out of Virginia, a Democrat. And we hope to have this introduced in the House soon. And then we will follow up with a Senate companion a little later in the Congress. The dynamics on this have changed a little, at least in the House. There's been a segment of the Democrats who were pro-labor and are pro-labor, but have now reservations and concerns because of their perception of how police labor has a role in protecting law enforcement officers or muddying the waters and preventing transparency. We're trying to address them at the state level, at the staff level. But at the end of the day, we are going to be pushing forward with this legislation. We're going to be seeking the support of every member of the House, and hopefully we'll get some committee attention. I'll remind our members that are participating today that we actually were scheduled to have a hearing on this legislation, followed by a markup in March of last year. But COVID and the events of the day overshadowed that and pretty much rewrote all expectations for 2020. Moving on to the next item. There we go. These next 2 pieces of legislation are top priorities of the FOP. They're very important. We were able to build a good foundation of support in the previous Congress for them, and we're back at it here again today. The LOSA Reform Act makes some changes to everyone's favorite bill, HR 218. It closes some loopholes. One of the things to emphasize when you're talking about this legislation, and I'll pause here to say, this will be reintroduced by Representative Bacon in the House in the next 2 weeks or so. And we are negotiating with Senator Kennedy and Senator Leahy, who just recently had a staff change. So it's going to take a little longer to get back to where we were with Senator Leahy's staff. Members will remember that Senator Leahy is the original author of LOSA, of HR 218, although the Senate bill was S253. And he also authored the 2 follow-up amendments to the law. So we think his involvement in making closing these loopholes is so important in the Senate. But again, one of the things to emphasize in your interactions with staff and with members is that this legislation in no way expands the universe of individuals who are going to be carrying firearms under 218 or under LEOSA. It simply is eliminating potential areas where officers, active and retired, might find themselves in legal jeopardy just because of how certain federal laws and certain state and local laws interact with one another and the limits that the LEOSA Act exemption provides. For example, it would make clear that the exemption applies to the magazine. That right now is not the case. It would ensure that the common areas, whether you're getting on a public bus or taking a cab, or just in a local area that's not federally controlled, but may not be crystal clear about whether or not the exemption attaches, it clears that issue up. It extends the exemption to access U.S. post offices, Social Security Administration offices, or Veteran Affairs facilities. It also would permit states to act affirmatively to extend the time between requalification from the statutory required 12 months to up to 36 months. But that would require action from the state. That just doesn't happen. A state would have to undertake that step. It also equalizes how state-issued concealed carry permits are treated as opposed to LEOSA carriage. For example, a retired officer visiting his grandchildren in Virginia could not go to a school function and carry his or her weapon. A state CCW permit could do so because they are exempt under the Guns Free School Zones Act. Similarly, a state-issued permit holder could visit a national park within the state that issued that carry permit, but a retired officer or an active officer from out of state could not do so. So again, we're not expanding the number of officers who are going to be carrying under LEOSA. We're just making sure that those who do are not going to be caught in an unusual situation where legal jeopardy may exist. Next, I want to talk about the Protect and Serve Act, which, as everybody here knows, has become quite important to the FOP, quite important to our men and women in the field who over the last 6 or 7 years have been increasingly targeted for violence, even more so in the last few years. Folks may know that the FOP tracks the number of officers shot in the line of duty. It is still news when an officer is killed in the line of duty by a firearm, but it's not always news when they're shot and they survive the incident. Given the increased technology in anti-ballistics, our officers are surviving these events more often, also because of the advances that have been made in medical trauma treatment. So it's important to remember, and I see this from some of our friends on the Democratic side that push back often when the data does not add up to an increase in officer deaths by firearm. Since the FOP has been tracking, which is now going on 6 years, the number of officers shot in the line of duty has gone up each and every year. And if people have questions about that, they can take a look at our website or our legislative update, where we keep everyone informed about that number on a monthly basis. The Protect and Serve Act would address this issue of increased violence targeting law enforcement by creating a new federal offense under Title 18 to specifically make targeting an officer for violence, death, or attempted murder a federal offense, so that it scales according to the outcome there. This is a very bipartisan act. Our leaders on this are John Rutherford, a former sheriff in Florida, and Val Demings, Democrat and former chief in Orlando, FOP member who worked her way up from the beat to become the chief of that agency. They led this effort in the previous Congress. They intend to do so again. And hopefully we'll have this legislation introduced in the next couple of weeks here. Mark, you want to advance the slide one more time? Oh, that is. Okay, now, folks, I'd like to introduce Mark McDonald, who's going to continue the presentation. I believe it's our intent that we take questions at the end from the chat. So Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Tim. I just want to follow up on what Tim had referred to. When meeting with your members, you guys are the experts. They rely on you. So of course we encourage and really want you guys to inform them, not just during these meetings over the next 2 weeks, but the most important thing with all of this is to have the frequent communication. So not just stay on the Hill, but throughout the year, we definitely encourage you guys to have that constant communication and contact with your members of Congress at all levels, but in particular here with the federal folks. So there are some lobbying tips on the screen here, but we have the lobbying tips in the briefing book, and we also have them in the app that'll go more in depth. But this year we had included some virtual tips to help with the Zoom call meetings that we are all getting used to. So just some reminders to stay unmuted, or how to work the system, the Zoom meeting, to make it as professional as if you guys were meeting in person. Next, I want to touch on the NFOP app. It's available to all members. If you don't have it already, we highly encourage you to go to the App Store or Google Play, download it. You'll have the weekly updates from the National Legislative Office. We have the press releases, statements, so on and so forth. But we do have the virtual or the National Down the Hill briefing book in the app. So it's at your fingertips during these meetings, and we put them there for you guys to use. You guys are the experts, but when it comes to the wonkiness of some of these bills and how to best communicate it, all of that is in the briefing book and again on the app. So if you guys have any questions, please let us know. We wish you guys the best of luck with the meetings, and please let us know the outcome. We'll be sending around a feedback form over the next week or so. So when you complete your meetings, we ask that you guys click the link, give us some feedback so we know at the National Legislative Office who we should be following up with and in regards to what. So again, best of luck with your meetings, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Rebecca Tyus, who's going to talk about the COVID-19 website that the FOP had launched and some of the resources on there.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Rebecca, and can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the COVID website. Mark, if you want to go to the next slide. So the FOP has a website at fopcovid19.org that has all the latest resources, up-to-date guidance on COVID-19. The COVID-19 activity updates and FOP legislative news pages are updated daily with information about the pandemic. So this includes information from different federal agencies, whether it's the Food and Drug Administration, FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, DOJ, HHS, or the White House. Any updated information about what they're doing to combat the pandemic will be found on those two pages, along with any updated guidance from the CDC on mask wearing or vaccines or any other ways to help protect yourself during the pandemic. You'll also find on that page, on those two pages. And if there's any updated guidance specific to law enforcement or corrections and detention facility staff, you'll find it on those two pages also. The Washington Watch Legislative Updates page on the website is where you can go to find information about legislation related to the pandemic. This could be legislation like the current COVID relief legislation that's working its way through Congress. Also on the website, you'll find the COVID line of duty deaths updated daily. You'll see an overall number and a state-by-state breakdown. As of today, there's been 432 officers that have died in the line of duty due to COVID. You can go to the next slide, Mark. So some of the priorities that the FOP has surrounding COVID-19, it includes getting expedited access to the vaccine for law enforcement officers. The CDC recommends that law enforcement officers be vaccinated in phase 1B, but because states have made their own determinations on vaccine rollouts, this varies across the whole country. So at the end of January, we sent a letter to President Biden asking for his help in ensuring law enforcement gets this expedited access. We're also pushing for state and local aid and any relief legislation as the pandemic has affected state and local budgets, and then of course, law enforcement agency budgets. The current relief legislation working its way through Congress has over $300 billion for state and local aid. And we're also pushing for the inclusion of the Social Security Fairness Act that Tim talked about earlier in any COVID-19 relief legislation. At the end of January, we also sent a letter to President Biden and 16 members of Congress asking to do that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our press liaison, Jessica, to talk a little bit about social media.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, as Rebecca said, I'm Jessica Cahill. I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit about social media and the community and media relations toolkit that the National FOP has created. As I'm sure many of you all know, the Fraternal Order of Police is the voice of America's law enforcement. And here at the National FOP, we fully understand the importance and the impact that social media has, especially now with this changing media climate. And on a daily basis through our social media channels, we deliver our message directly to our members, to the press, and to the communities in which you all serve. And so in order to help shape the narrative and perception around law enforcement that is out there, we really need to have a coordinated and unified effort to speak with one voice. So that's why we're really asking for every lodge and every member to follow our social media channels so that you can join us in spreading the truth, joining in the conversation, and defending the police. And you can find us on Facebook and Twitter by searching at GLFOP, and on Instagram by searching at FOP National. And also just a reminder of, as you're having these meetings with your members of Congress coming up in the next few weeks, if you are planning on posting something on social media about your meeting or what your lodge is doing, we just ask that you use the hashtag on those posts, hashtag FOP on the Hill. That way, we at the National, we can all see that hashtag, your followers can see it, we can all share each other's meetings and whatnot. And now I'm going to move on to the Community and Media Relations Toolkit, which the National FOP created. And this is a communications guide that really helps unify our message and strengthen our collective voice from a local, state, and national perspective. Just to give you a quick layout of this toolkit, it covers the development of a strong community relations, community partnership program, provides guidance on building strong local media relations and how to also best prepare for press interviews or speaking opportunities. And it also addresses today's media landscape and this new digital world that everyone is still getting used to, while providing core messaging and best practices when setting up strong and effective communication shops and programs throughout your lodges. And we're really urging lodges to take a look and take advantage of the FOP Community and Media Relations Toolkit. And you can either find it on the NFOP app that Mark talked about, or at national.fop.net/toolkit. And I will pass it back to our great national president, Pat Yost.
Okay, well, thank you. And I appreciate all of the speakers that shared a great deal of information. Let me go over a couple of things. But while I do that, if any of you would like to speak, if you could look that there's a chat section at the bottom, just let us know, and we will we'll pull those questions and answers, and we'll get everybody to kind of chime in on. But let me just touch on a few things just to expound on some of what we discussed. I know one question and that I get everywhere. Let me go ahead and get this one out. It's not as much a legislative issue as one that all of you are wondering, and that is, what does Police Week look like this year? So let me tell you where we stand with it. The committee has met and came up with a plan. We recognize that trying to have a traditional memorial service is just not going to be in the cards for us again this year. Now, the problem is this year we're expecting to have to honor over 500 names, and we know that it's just getting it's going to be almost impossible for us if we don't find a way to make it work this year. So we have submitted our request for a joint resolution for the House and the Senate to allow us to have it on the Capitol grounds, but have it in a smaller version, something a little different, in that we will have in groups, in clusters for social distancing, family clusters, and allow us to bring really just the surviving families onto the Capitol grounds, and those that are necessary to put this on. Our goal is just that, to honor our fallen and stream to monitors, hopefully in the mall, so that those that are visiting can still be in a close proximity, but not on the grounds itself. We feel that that's our best chances of getting a permit to have it this year. So it's in the works. There's no decision has been made yet. COPS is still moving forward. They are having their event unless the governor decides that they cannot meet and comes up with a rule that limits the amount of people that are going to be present within the hotel. And I know the candlelight vigil is slated to go off at an alternate location. So everything is in the works. It's I just don't have a definite for everything yet. Also, I just want to, I know that Tim talked a little bit about windfall elimination, government pension offset. We have we called it the kitchen cabinet. We are working again. We've already had meetings to set up that whole process again and to build up our co-signers, our co-sponsors. It is important. We want to get to that 290, and it is going to take your efforts. And I can't emphasize enough our needs to communicate with us. We want to get everyone back online that has been supporters of it before, but we also know we have a lot of freshmen out of this year in Congress as well. So we really need your help. I think the difference we have this year is of previous years. We were hoping to get a hearing. We had a promise on a Senate side that we would get a hearing, but I'm not too sure that was going to pan out. Still a high bar for us to get to, but we did have one senator said that he would push for that hearing for us to have it on the Senate side. But we have to. The reality is I'm not too sure we could accomplish it with the Trump administration of having this overturned. I'm not saying that we necessarily can get it now, but I think conditions are favorable for us to have a successful run at this. So I can't emphasize enough the need for all of us to really have that heart-to-heart discussion with our members of Congress to get them on board. Another one is the LOSA fix. One thing that we had a lot of problem with last year, and while you're having this conversation of getting support for that, remember that during the whole beginning of the pandemic, the way the law was written, the act was written, it required that qualifying happen during a certain period of time, and that was impossible for it to happen because of the pandemic. And I think that's a great example to point out why this is, the language in here is necessary for us to move forward, so we don't find ourselves for these unforeseen circumstances that really created a lot of turmoil and question whether or not LOSA still applied during that time of the pandemic. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance to follow up with whatever feedback you receive from your members of Congress to our legislative office, so that we can know to be able to process these things. So with that, I know that we have a few questions, so let's get into those. So if I can get to them. All right. Who arranges the meetings with Congress? I'm not sure. This is not necessarily in the order, so you help me out here. I don't have glasses on. So if I can figure out who it's coming from, I'll get them to, we'll turn on their mic and get them. I can't quite get it to. All right, the first one, Gary Walski. Any legislation on a Medicare 55? Yes, actually, Gary, thank you for bringing it up. We absolutely support and just if I could, maybe Tim might be better, or Jim, better to speak on it. It is absolutely a priority for us, something that we do support. And Tim, do you want to speak on it, or Jim? Just an update.
Yeah, I can take a crack at it, Pat.
Okay.
I spoke with, this is a bill that's being largely driven by Senator Brown. I spoke with his staff about 2 weeks ago or so, maybe a week and a half. This was one of the issues that we covered. This is going to be reintroduced. They're looking for some additional Republican partners. This is an important piece of legislation. It was in the previous Congress, but given the majority in the Senate, it was just going to be difficult to get that ball rolling and that ball moving. I think the circumstances now in a 50-50 split Senate are a little bit more favorable to getting this legislation the attention it needs. Our strength here is we have a really good case that public safety officers, because of the nature of their profession, the fact that they retire earlier, and that they're to the extent that they have local public pensions, either right from their agency or from Ohio or California, a pension system that's administered by the state or by the county that doesn't kick in. So you have that gap between the time at which you retire and the time you're eligible for Social Security or to draw down your full pension. It's a very powerful argument. There are other public public employee groups who are making that same argument, but I think we have the greater merits because of that gap between age of retirement and age of eligibility to begin collecting those pensions. So that'll absolutely get reintroduced. Probably be closer to the end of March, from what I derived from Senator Brown's staff, but it'll be coming.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next one, I think it's probably Ed Holland. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who's asking it, but how do we arrange meetings with Congress? If so, do we simply do cold calls? No, I think the intention there is that you're going to call and make that request to Zoom in, to set up a Zoom meeting. And but I don't know if Bob Cherry, I know the committee was talking about trying to assist with those and broke them down into states. Bob, do you have anything that you can add on that?
Yeah. So I think, to that question is, to get in contact with your state FOP president or whoever your liaison is with the Grassroots Action Network, and they will assist you with working with Tim Richardson and Mark McDonald and their staff in setting up a meeting with Congress. But having said that, Pat, I think nothing stops, any of us as FOP members, your wives, husbands, family, from, sending emails, letters, calls to, your specific congressman and to senators in support of the bills that Jim Pasco and Tim Richardson have highlighted as our priority.
Okay, great. Thanks. Rando, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. And as for the next one, Ralph Johnson, in this forever changing political climate, how does the local lodge begin to build a relationship with experts, police advocates for the voice of local politicians? Can the Grand Lodge and state lodges assist in building this bridge? Well, I absolutely. Look, there's no question. When we started talking about this in the beginning, we have many challenges ahead of us in this changing climate. We witness it in Washington, and we're navigating through it. But the reality is that it is probably going to be much greater on a state and the local levels. A lot of this police reform is taking hold, depending on where you live. Some stronger than others. But the reality is that's really where the relationships need to be built. So I would definitely recommend that you reach out, Ralph, to your state lodge and start that discussions. I'm sure they're probably very much engaged in the state narrative and know that, the changes. There is a trend that is crossing this country for sure. They're singing off the same sheet of music, trying to eliminate qualified immunity and our rights to be able to negotiate for our discipline and a number of other things. So we really need to have that united voice. So please reach out to your state lodge in doing so. And the other thing I would highly encourage is to make sure that you're part of the app and also the legislative Washington Watch, where we give out information every week, letting you know the activities that are going on in our position on these activities. Jennifer Thomas, what about trying to attach the law enforcement officers equity bill to an existing bill for traction and getting it approved? Tim or Jim, would y'all like to take that one on?
I can take a
Yeah,
crack.
go ahead, Tim.
No, go ahead, boss.
All right. The answer to that is we have to be opportunistic with any piece of legislation. And if we find one that looks like it's moving and we can get agreement from the principal proponents of it, or a strong offer of our bill as an amendment, then we're going to pursue it. If we see a way to pass it standing alone, we'll do it. But candidly, it's far more likely that it'll be the way you asked about it. It'll go as an amendment to something else, or we'll go into a major vehicle of some other type. For example, and this is just a hypothetical, a COVID relief bill is going to have probably hundreds of not totally germane amendments included in it. And I don't believe that is a vehicle where we'd hold up. But that kind of a scenario is a very likely outcome if we're going to be successful with this legislation.
Okay, great, Jim. So here's a very good one. And Mike, I'm not sure which Mike it is. Don't have a last name, but Mike, I want to thank you for asking us because it's on my list to talk about, and it has to do with the Justice and Policing Act. And there's no question. The comment is that there's some really bad use of force information, qualified immunity, and a lot of other things that are absurd. And we'll agree with you. And so just tell you where I suspect where it's going, and I'll ask Jim to chime in if he'd like to add anything to it. But I would expect that sometime this week it is slated to be taken up again in the House. There will not be any amendments to it. It will not go through committee. It'll go straight to the floor. There'll be no amendments, but there will be a debate, and I would expect right down party lines that bill is going to be passed out of the House and move on to the Senate. I think that this, in many ways, is symbolic in the fact that it's probably a promise. That it has zero chance of gaining any traction in the Senate side of it. So I think, again, there's a lot of information there that's really bad and detrimental to policing. And it was last time it passed as well. But my expectation is this is probably just theater for playing to a base. On the Senate side, I expect that there's going to be we'll see some type of action coming at some point. I know Cory Booker out of New Jersey is working on a Senate side on a policing act. He has agreed and promised that he would work with us and include us in the discussions with that, but we have not seen any of that action yet. So just brace yourself. It is going to pass through the House. It's going to be exactly like it was before. There will be no amendments to it, and I expect it will pass, but I think we just need to focus on the fact that it's not going to make it in the Senate side. So a very good question. I'm glad you brought it up. Something we certainly needed to share with everyone. The next question is Ralph Johnson, having to do with the change in the national leadership significantly diminished our access to the White House. So let me, if I can, just tell you my perception of what we have, and Jim can piggyback back on that as well. Our members endorsed Donald Trump. We can go down the path and talk about why that endorsement was there. It was based off of a process that has been decades old within our organization. And to my knowledge, this is the first time that our process ever presented us with a unanimous endorsement. That endorsement was given. We added value to that endorsement. I think the big difference between us and a lot of other police organizations is that we spent our energy promoting the candidate we endorsed, while some of the other organizations did maybe went a little overboard in their efforts to try and tear down Biden campaign. Because of that, I think it gave us a unique position in the Biden camp, and as a result, since day one, we have had open dialogue with them. And as Jim had mentioned to you in his discussions that he's been part of their law enforcement transition. and still has daily contact with them every single day. So I guess the best way, and I've spoken at a few events before, and I've spoken, there's no doubt that we have a seat at the table. But I'll preface it by saying this, that I've seen the menu, and we're somewhat finicky eaters, and there are not a whole lot on the menu that we have an appetite for. But the end result is that I feel that we're in a good position to be able to give voice to our members on pressing issues in a changing climate. Jim, would you like to add into that?
Yeah, I think you've pretty well summed it up. I think that they have operated in a very traditional political way. You know, politicians, when they get elected, they look around. First thing they do is they look around and see the people who weren't supporting them in the election, and they try to win them over. And in that context, they have come to us. And by the same token, the fact that there's a Democratic president now hasn't changed our priorities or our needs one bit. And there's only one president at a time. So we have to do the best we can, whether we supported that president or not, whether we agree wholeheartedly with that president or not, to work with them collegially and cut the best deal we can for the members. And so we both have interest in a harmonious relationship to the extent that that's possible, with the understanding we aren't always going to agree. As long as we couch our disagreements civilly and work with them civilly, they're a traditional administration. They're going to behave in a traditional way, and they're going to be, you know, it's a situation where as long as we're dealing with one another in good faith, we're going to continue to be talking, and as long as we're talking, there's hope. It's once you stop talking and start throwing bombs that you're out of gas, mostly because you put it in bombs.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Thank you, Jim. I see a few more. I got some questions, and I thank the staff. They're answering some of them having to do with, I guess, maybe some logistical things. I see at the bottom, and they're kind of coming in, and it's hard for me to keep track of them. So if I miss any, I'll get you to open your mic and ask the questions directly. But I see one. I'm asking for an update on the mobile COVID testing app. That testing app is in beta testing right now. We have about roughly 500 FOP members that have been invited to participate in it. We used it with our 2 training events that we had over the weekend, as it was strictly on a voluntary basis. I can tell you that I've been using it daily, and find that it's, of course I don't have COVID, so it's hard for me to check it, but each day I can tell you that a little bit of a satisfaction in knowing that my baseline is showing that it's consistent. So it's nothing that leads me to, I just think there's just peace of mind there. I think that at the end of the day, I think a few months down the line, you've seen a lot of comments made about your ability to be able to fly domestic flights and do a lot of things without COVID tests. I can see where this technology is probably had in mind when they made those comments, because I would expect what you're going to see, if it's not this app, or it might be some other app that's going to use these baselines for you to be able to get access into locations. What it does is it generates a QR code on the receiving end, and we tested it at our training. They check the QR code. It lets them know whether or not you're COVID free. So I look for some more information coming down. In the very near future. This is going to be opened up to all FOP members and their families. I would think probably within the next couple of weeks. The beta test should be finished very soon. The system is working. Their concern is wanting to build up the bandwidth to be able to handle the volume of people, and that's what they're working on right now. So I should have some more coming very soon. Let me just scan through this real quick and see if I can find any additional information. Any questions? If I haven't answered your question, if you could open your mic and feel free to ask that question.
Yes, sir. President Yos.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Hernando Pacheco. We spoke earlier. Actually, we we emailed, contacted. First and foremost, thank you so much for your dedicated, loyal service, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the attention you've given me. I did send you a text message just now. concerning the credentials for DoD police officers. As a former sergeant with DoD police, I was also the quartermaster. We, specifically from the DoD, have to pay for our credentials through a third-party contractor. As a quartermaster, I used to create the IDs and issue them to every officer and spend approximately $2 to $3 a piece. Where we have within the federal government, probably I'd say close to 90 federal law enforcement agencies. And unfortunately, the DoD, we're the stepchild of every other federal law enforcement agency, and they expect us to pay for it. Whereas other agencies, you know, the top brass, the FBI, the CBP, I used to be with INS, which is now also ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. All these other agencies, they issue the IDs for free. You get your credentials for free, and they also include your rank as a former officer. And I also worked up in New York State. And most of the retirees, they have their position, their former position, what department they work for, and the agency that is issuing these credentials at the moment does not want to do anything as far as any modifications whatsoever. And not to mention, you spend approximately $125, not including the FBI NCIC check, the NICS check. So you're looking at approximately close to $200 every 5 years just to get your credentials. And if there's any blemishes whatsoever, you know, the false arrest, they will not issue you the credentials. My question to you, sir, and to the rest of the committee, is there any possibility to reach out to the DoD? Right now, I'm currently living on disability because I had an injury. I sustained an injury, and thank God I have my income coming in. However, it's very, very nominal, but I'm still an active member. I'm actually the state trustee for Lodge 138 of Federal Law Enforcement Officers in Broward County, Florida. Anyway, yeah, getting back to that, I was just wondering if there's any possibility to reach out to them, you know, because this is a government agency, and it's very surprising in this day and age that the federal government cannot issue credentials. I mean, it's incredible, beyond me. I just don't understand why.
Yeah. Tim, well, I'm not too sure we have an answer for that, but Tim, would you mind doing some research on it and see if you can't reach out and touch base with them and see if we can find some, at least some information or resolution?
Sure. We'd previously talked and we put some feelers out there, but this came to light near the end of last year when we had obviously the election and now a transition. So it's an effort I probably need to restart now that we have a confirmed secretary and he'll be filling out his positions in the DoD. Historically, as maybe Sergeant Hernando knows, DoD has been very difficult to work with on all aspects of LOSA implementation. So unfortunately, it's just something we'll have to grind through again.
Yes, Mr. Richardson, thank you so much. And just so you could see, this little piece of thing is over $125. That's all it is. And there's nothing specific. It just has your name. And the only thing it indicates, which is in the magenta line, I don't know if you can see it, it says that you're a qualified law enforcement officer. But I have so many officers that are friends of mine throughout the country, and they say this ain't worth a dime. You know, and some states, if you go to what I consider the northern communistic states, I'm originally from New York, they'll lock you up. And I've had some experiences, as well as many other of my colleagues have had experiences and even been detained and even as far as arrested for the most minute things. So it's a very urgent thing to not only myself, but to the rest of my colleagues. So it's, you know, if it can be done, we'd really appreciate it. And again, sir, thank you also for corresponding with me several times via email. I appreciate that very much, sir.
Thank you, and good luck. We'll work on it and see if we can get some resolution for you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I see another question. What's the status of the FOP National Conference in Indianapolis? Is it still a go? Absolutely, it is a go. A couple of us went down and met because they wanted to make some changes within the convention center. Allows us a little bit more opportunity for social distancing should they be required to spread us out a little bit more, but it also gave the opportunity for a very large conference to occur on the heels of ours, one that is extremely important to the city. So if they cancel ours, they have to cancel this really large one that's very important to the city itself. So they're putting a great deal of effort into making sure that's going to happen. I have no reason to believe that the conference in Indianapolis is going to be delayed or impacted in any way. The worst that can happen is we'll do social distancing on site. We will definitely have certain rules for for the protection of those that are attending. But at the end of the day, I have no expectation that we will not be meeting. Make your plans to be in Indianapolis. We're looking forward to seeing everyone there. And I'm looking at, did I miss anything else? Anyone else have anybody? If I'm missing it, if you could open your mic. Okay. I'm not seeing any more new questions. If I missed any, I'm just looking real quick to see if I missed something.
This is Mark. Could I just add one more thing? And I just sent. I'm sending 2 messages in the group chat function to everybody that allows, if you click the link, you're able to send a pre-composed message to your member of Congress, urging them to support the Law Enforcement Officers Equity Act, and another one for the Social Security Fairness Act. By doing this, if you share it with others and they write their own message, by you typing in your zip code, it will determine which member of Congress is yours, and we'll send that message to them. So please check those out. They are I'm going to be posting them in the conversation chat mode right here, and they are also in the legislative update.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And I don't see the question asked, but I would imagine while we're talking to our members of Congress, the discussion about COVID and the COVID deaths may come up. Mark mentioned to you, or Rebecca mentioned to you that we had 432 deaths recorded to date. Let me explain to you what we've done on our part. Initially when COVID started, we knew that our members who didn't have the ability to do social distancing were going to be exposed and potentially put at a much more disadvantaged position than the average person. So we reached out and through the Department of Justice, it started with the Attorney General, who issued an opinion or a directive that covered PSOB benefits for officers that down the line of duty. We internally within our office, Mark is the one who handles this. We do extensive research to determine what law enforcement officers through media sources are identified as passing from COVID. And from that, we created our list, and that's how we came up with this number. On our side, and since then, Congress has passed an act that protects these officers as well. Since then, we've reached out to every one of the law enforcement agencies we've identified, all 432, and providing them with the information necessary for them to be able to make that declaration so they can be eligible for PSOB benefits. So I know when you're talking to your members of the Congress, I would certainly encourage you to point out the sacrifice that our profession is doing on a regular basis in order to protect our communities. Because often, I guess so many want to talk about defunding police and attacking law enforcement, and in reality, we're putting ourselves in harm's way protecting communities. So by all means, please, add that to your discussions. Let's see. Okay, if I don't see anything else, so with that, again, if I could, I want to thank the committee for their work, and I certainly want to thank the staff for all that they've done. As I started this off talking about the hard work that they've done in a very unusual climate with COVID, not once have we missed an opportunity to be able to speak and give voice to our 357,000 members across this country, and made some meaningful changes and impact during that time as well. We continue to do so and speak with that one voice in order to call attention to the challenges that we face in our profession. And I thank each and every one of you for what you're doing. Brothers and sisters, you've never had an opportunity, a greater opportunity you do right now to make a meaningful difference in the lives of the people we serve. So thank you for your time and effort in doing that.